Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor, where we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. This is a STS Special, Surviving My Biggest Case. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime. And this is an STS Special, Surviving My Biggest Case, with a face that is familiar to you all, one of our best guests. He is Jim Van Allen, a certified profiler and experienced threat and risk assessment specialist. He has over 31 years of experience in law enforcement and investigations with the Ontario Provincial Police, 15 of which were spent as the manager of the OPP Criminal Profiling Unit. Jim, great to see you again. Thank you for always offering your great insights into the criminal mind. And this is a story that you personally dealt with that dates back, I believe, to 2002. So we're talking like 21 years ago. Paint the picture. What were you doing at that time? How'd you get called into this case? What was it all about?
At the time, I was, the manager of the profiling unit. We had a number of other profilers there. There were two other profilers as well. Australia, and we would often host these people, and they would come out to our cases with us and work. The case happened in November 2003. And we got a call from the homicide unit of the Toronto Police Service that they had been working on the case of a murder of a female realtor in a very trendy area of Toronto called Yorkville. And if you know Toronto at all, Yorkville is a special place. Lots of high-end stores, boutiques, restaurants, everything trendy, everything nice. When the Rolling Stones come to Toronto to rehearse, that's where they stay, type of thing. It's upper scale. So they have violent crime there, but very rare. So we attended as a group and listened to a briefing from the detectives about what they had found, and they were dealing with the murder of a 38-year-old real estate agent who owned her own real estate brokerage. Her name was Lisa Posland. And Lisa was killed in the building in which her real estate office was located. But this was a Saturday. Lisa was in just doing some administrative tasks. Nobody really knew she was going to be in there. She was largely the sole employee of the company. She would do a lot of the administrative tasks. So she was in there getting caught up. She was doing some scheduling, some bill payments, things like that. She took a break. She went out walking around Yorkville. She had a hair appointment. She had her hair done 3 times a week. She was very an attractive lady and very attentive to her professional appearance. She had dinner by herself in a small restaurant and then returned to the office at 7 p.m., did some more work, called her mother on the phone at 8 p.m., and told her within minutes she'd be leaving the office and she would call her mother when she got home. And that would have taken normally about 15 to 20 minutes. She never called the mother, which was very unusual. Lisa was a woman of her word. She kept in a very close contact with her family. So her family knew something was wrong right from the outset. The mother and the sister went down to the office building and it was totally locked up and closed. They couldn't get in. Lisa wasn't answering her phone. They called the Toronto police and made a case that it was so unusual for Lisa to be missing that something had to be wrong. And they were so persuasive that the police attended immediately, gained access to the building, went to Lisa's office, which was, the door was closed, but it was unlocked. The alarm system wasn't on. No signs of a struggle, no signs of Lisa either. So they started doing a search of the building, and in the basement utility room where there's, say, telephone wires coming in for the connections for the building, they found a large blood stain on the floor outside that utility room. And they got the key for the door, and they went in and they found Lisa's body lying on the floor, dressed, inside the utility room. The remarkable things were that she'd been stabbed 3 times, but she had her throat cut. And which to me, I mean, I've seen at the time probably 800 murders, and I've seen throat injuries like this where the offender slashes the victim's throat, but it's rare. And it's very cold. When you do that to another human being, that's cold. Like, you really are determined that that person is going to die. And it doesn't happen in all cases. So it's, to me, it tells you a fair bit about the offender.
Jim, let me just stop you there for 1 sec.
Sure.
So 2 questions off the top of my head. Number 1, were you in Toronto at that time, or were you still in Western Canada?
No, I was working in Ontario, which Toronto is the provincial capital of Ontario.
Okay, so you were there. So
yeah,
but at what point in a homicide do investigators at what point in a homicide do the investigators say we need Jim Van Allen on this to try to create the profile for this killer?
It can be any point. It can. We often got called in right at the start of the case when they realized they were dealing with something that may have been unusual for their typical crime experience. But you have to realize this is Toronto. This is the biggest city in Canada. They have one of the largest municipal police forces in the country, and they're very experienced at what they do. So this investigation had been running for probably 4 weeks before we got called in. The reason being is that the investigative team was split of the opinion whether it was a sexual crime, whether it wasn't, whether it was a murder committed by somebody known to Lisa or a stranger, or it was up in the air what the murder was. And they wanted an independent, unbiased opinion, and they called our unit, and we attended with 4 people. I was taking carriage of the case, ownership of the case, so it was going to be my responsibility. So I did most of the talking.
And so when you finally do get called in, and by the way, I think it's important to note, because you sent me some notes. I thought it was interesting that she didn't really date very often. She dated very infrequently and was, as you put it, romantically conservative. You said she had dinner that night, but alone, you said.
Yeah.
But when you get called in on this, what is the very first set of steps that you follow? What are the first things you do?
Well, I mean, you listen to what everybody's going to tell you. And there's often, you have to sit through explanations of alternative investigative theories, because rarely do you go into an investigation like this and everybody's on the same page. You've got investigators that favor theory A, some favor theory B, and maybe there's even a theory C in the room, and you have to listen to all those and pick the most probable ones. But when you say, where does your mind first go? it has to go to who the victim is. And this is what we've discussed on previous shows as victimology. You have to know everything about the victim in order to try and understand why somebody selected them as the victim for a violent crime. Murder's pretty rare in Canada. If you get murdered, 80% chance is going to be by somebody known to you, a family member, friend, associate, something like that, an acquaintance. And then you've got that, at the time, about a 12% stranger factor that might explain why they died. So you have to understand who the victim is to try and understand maybe why the dynamics of the crime unfolded as they did. One of the examples of that is when they examined Lisa's body, they found that her knit turtleneck top, which was on and tucked in at the waist, was inside out. And you could see the seams running on the exterior down, where the sleeves are attached and things like that. And it was arguable, well, did she just put it on like this in the morning? Or did the top come off and she put it back on in a hurry? So I wanted to know as much as I could about Lisa. And I was hearing things like very attentive to her appearance, had her hair done 3 times a day. Her fingernails were recently polished, but they were quite scratched up because of an ongoing struggle. They were describing the inside of Lisa's apartment to us, and they said how neat and orderly everything was, and even the labels on cans in the pantry would be turned a certain way, just like you see in some pictures. Some people are like that. They favor a high degree of organization. Little
so
details.
It doesn't. I'm no profiler, but it doesn't sound like she would put her shirt on inside out and
exactly
go all day, right?
Yeah, but some guys have a story about their wife who put a sweater on backwards and wore it all day before she noticed it and stuff like that. But one of the things I found over the years is I've met some very nice officers, very intelligent officers, super guys who married their high school sweethearts and have been with one woman for their entire life. So their rationale is, if my wife does it, every other woman in the world must do it that way. Well, let me tell you, I've dated, been in a few relationships. I've been married a couple of times. I have maybe a wider base of knowledge than some, but women are very complex, and you cannot make simple rules that absolutely apply to them. One doesn't do what the other one does, and that's a
whole other profiling expertise. Profiling women. That's a series.
That's a series for you next time. But yeah, I didn't see Lisa's doing that. So it explained to me, or it indicated to me rather, that her top was off, and she put it back on in a hurry. It was important for her to get that top back on any way she could. The top, and her the belt of her pants was unfastened, but the button at the waistband was done up. So some detectives thought, well, maybe the belt came open during a struggle. And other people thought, well, maybe the belt came open, indicating that the pants had been lowered or off as well. So we've got indication that the pants had been tampered with, indication that the top had been off, and she redressed in a hurry. We've got a female victim. We've got signs of a struggle, and she's stabbed. In my opinion, this had the earmarks of sexual homicide. And there was no overt indication of sexual assault at that time. There had been an autopsy done of the body, but a lot of the testing for DNA wasn't back yet, and it was very slow for some reason, and that sort of hampered the investigation. You follow the evidence, but that evidence wasn't back yet to follow. So people were going on their favorite theories and this and that, and they wanted mine. And I quickly came to the opinion it was a sexual homicide. And there was, Lisa was a very serious businesswoman. And anytime somebody was slow or late paying a bill, she would sue them. And she had 2 current lawsuits against 2 rather large international corporations for non-payment of her bills, which led some people to think that she might have been killed by for business reasons, either a competitor or one of these big corporations did it. Well, I know the 2 corporations, and I think it's very unreasonable to think that they're going to have a hit squad that goes out and kills a real estate agent that's suing them. They have a raft of lawyers, and they're going to protect their own interests. They're not going to kill a real estate broker. So I thought that wasn't really even on the table, and if it was so far to the back of the table we weren't even going to consider it. You have to focus on the probabilities, not the possibilities type of thing. So looking at everything else and this reconstructing what must have happened, clearly she was sexually assaulted in the basement of the building in a utility room that very few people could get into. The door was locked, but the killer was able to get in there. And one of the maintenance supervisors told us, yeah, that door is a little tricky. If you hit it with your shoulder just right, you can get it to open. Well, that's an inside trick. Not everybody would know that. The police waited to get a key brought to them. This guy would have known how to bump it with his shoulder and open it. So that's
I assume right away you're thinking maybe it's someone who works at the building potentially.
Yeah. So we were talking about that, and in addition to that, there was a very unique construction boot style tread in blood, making blood-stained prints in this area in the basement, suggesting the guy was wearing a construction boot. And I said, well, wouldn't it be fair to say, like in winter, there would be a heavy treaded outdoor boot? And the police said, no, we definitely checked into this and been told that it's a construction type boot. So I have to accept that. So again, that goes to show that he's in that trade, and construction boots wouldn't necessarily be in vogue in Yorkville. So that puts him in a service type job, right? So service type job, he gets into a locked building. He gets into a locked utility room. He seems to have knowledge that the utility room was there. A lot of people didn't even know it existed, but he knew. And he was able to take her from her office on the 4th floor, speared her down through stairwells, because they found the odd transfer of blood, like a fingertip with blood going down the walls in the stairwells, suggesting a movement from her office to the utility room. And the knife had been out. Obviously, violence had occurred up by her office because of the blood. So the blood trail starts up high and ends up down low, where we have fatal wounds and everything else. So reconstructing what must have gone on, accepting there was a sexual assault, there was a time lapse there where she had the opportunity to redress, and he's standing there thinking about it. If he doesn't want her to redress, he can stop her right there. But we've got that time phase that she was able to redress. And I saw it as this guy standing there thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Am I going to kill this victim or not? And he makes the decision that he is, and he does follow through with the plan. So I extrapolate that and I say, okay, we've got a sexual crime against a woman. What's going to be in this guy's background? More sexual crimes against women, because that's what we see here now. And it's escalated to a sexual homicide. So I said, in my opinion, this guy has been convicted of sexual crimes in the past because he has left the victims alive and they have testified against him. And now he's decided, and he served probably a good sentence for these sexual assaults, and he doesn't want to go back to jail. So
this is fascinating. Let me just hop in for one second. So this is fascinating on many levels. So that inside out sweater that she has on, that makes you think she had to put it back in a hurry. So she's sexually, I just want to make sure I understand this. Your belief is she's sexually assaulted, the top comes off. She then has an opportunity to put it back on. And in that moment, you're literally seeing this guy watching her, deciding, do I let her live or do I kill her? But then your profile suggests he's been caught before by the victim or sent to jail or prison because of that before. So now he sees this opportunity and he acts out. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. And what I've said on previous shows is a lot of criminal histories are evolutionary, and they learn from their mistakes and they try and become better criminals. They read about stuff that they are doing and they want to know about it. They try different techniques, but they learn from experience. That's the best teacher for all of us. And he got caught. He did the crime. He got caught. He went to jail. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. It confronted him. The necessity was there. He had to kill her in his mind, and he did. And so that, to me, started writing a lot of the guy's history and what we were looking for in the guy that would have killed killed Lisa. And even the family, Lisa's family, and I met them at a media broadcast. The case went unsolved for pretty much over the winter. And in March, Toronto police wanted to do a media broadcast, try and get additional information. And I was going to talk about select parts of the profile. You don't want to give it all out, but you want to talk about certain things. And they had the family there as well. And I met Lisa's sister. And it was one of these freaky experiences because there was a stunning resemblance between Lisa and her sister. And when I'm talking to her, I'd seen Lisa's picture and it's like I'm standing there talking to the victim. They look so close to each other. And that's the second time in my career that's happened where I've met a victim's relative.
Wow.
But
Let me ask you, just start from the time that you arrive, from the time that you are asked to profile this case, how long does it take to create the profile? And I assume that it's sort of ever evolving as you continue to get information, but how long from the time you get there till you sort of have your first iteration of a profile?
Well, the wheels are turning right off the bat. I mean, as I'm looking at everything and hearing the information, impressions, interpretations, inferences are starting to form. And the consultation with the detectives took maybe about 3.5 hours, short discussion, and then we left to travel the 1.5 hours back up to where our headquarters building was. The next day they called and said, yeah, we'd like a written report of what you think. And okay, I've got their information. I've got the impressions. I think they gave me a package of the photographs they'd taken as well, which is very helpful to go through and review. Make sure you've got the right reconstruction sequence of events, commenting on different things properly. I can't remember how long it took, but I mean, probably a couple of days to write the profile, and that's just my obsessive need to go over it and try and make sure it sounds relevant and reasonable, and has the persuasive quality that you would like to give people. My job is to help. My job is to understand the crime scene and help convey that understanding to them so that they can put that into operational strategies. I tell them what we're going to look for in the guy's background. In case you get a suspect name, check it out for this. If all these things are there, he's a higher suspect. They had already been through the building. They had checked parking access logs. Everybody's got to swipe in as you go into the building. All of them checked out. They checked out all the cleaners and tradespeople who had been in the building recently, and they were satisfied beyond all doubt that it wasn't anybody that was working in the building. Mm. And it was still my opinion that the only reason this murder happened was because the victim and the offender are both linked to the same building. There was nothing else that suggested his ability to get into that building and move around like he did without a lot of familiarity. And maybe even had a set of keys, or he knew the insider trick, how to shoulder bump that utility room door and open it. He knew the utility room was there. He was wearing construction type boots. It only fit, or at best fit, that one theory. And when you're developing theories like that, if you have evidence that doesn't fit with your theory, you're using the wrong theory. So you've got to go back, retweak it until all things agree with your theory. Then you can be pretty confident or comfortable in advancing that as a theory that other people should use. In any event, we do this media release in March, and I'm talking to Lisa's sister, and she said they had read the profile. The Toronto police had given them a copy of my profile, which was a bit surprising, but she wanted to talk about it. She said, I want to know why you think what you do, because we thought it would be a business associate or adversary or something like that that killed Lisa. And I said, I'm seeing different things. If it was a business type thing, I'd be looking for this. But with what I'm seeing at the crime, I think it's somebody from that building that targeted her and killed her for a sexual purpose. So not much came from the press release. There were no new tips or anything like that. So after a couple of weeks, Lisa's sister went back to the office building and she started banging on every door, talking to people. And the profile I had written was, it was going to be a male. He's going to be white. He was going to be between 25 and 35 years of age. Now, personally, I find that the most dangerous age for males, 27 to 30. I find, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds can kill. But if you watch a lot of the violent crimes, when they publish the age, you'll be surprised the number of times it's 27 to 30. Plus Lisa's age is going to put him, he's not a kid. He's going to, because his career is evolutionary, he's going to have a background of theft and sexual assault, violence against women. I made the mention that he probably had served time for other sexual offenses, serious time, and he didn't want to go back. I linked him to the building by virtue of his occupation. And I said, he's going to be somebody who doesn't have a accurate self-image of himself. He's going to think he's better than what he really is, and a little bit cooler, a little bit suave, more suave than he is. And because he's not showing a lot of resource stuff, I said he's going to be a renter instead of having his own place. And I said he's also going to be known as a very irresponsible and undependable worker. So on the basis of that, Lisa's sister knocked on doors and she said, "Do you know anybody like this?" And they said, "Well, yeah, that sort of sounds like a guy that used to work here, but he doesn't work here anymore. He used to come in and visit after he left. He was fired, but he kept coming back to visit. But he hasn't been back to visit since about the time of the murder." So wow. She didn't get his name. Nobody could remember his name that she was talking to, but it was a guy who, and then all these descriptors. So she went to the Toronto police and told them what she had done. And they were a little bit PO'd that she went and did that. And they saw it as a little bit meddlesome in the investigation, but they reluctantly assigned somebody to go back to the building and follow up on Lisa, the sister's information.
Well, shouldn't the Toronto police have done that? Shouldn't they have canvassed the whole building and kind of asked people?
They did. But whoever did the canvassing didn't ask the questions just like Lisa's sister did.
Wow.
Didn't establish the same rapport. Didn't understand the answer as it was being told to them, and walked away with a different impression. And that introduces us to maybe, I don't want to say tunnel vision, because it wasn't tunnel vision, but it wasn't real open-mindedness either, I mean, people make mistakes. I've seen a lot of other mistakes in investigations where you get meaningful information that isn't properly valued as it should be. Or you miss for some reason, you ask a question that doesn't uncover the information like the correct version of the question might have. It's human communication. You and I might know each other for 2-3 years. All of a sudden you ask a question a different way. I'll tell you a story we haven't discussed before. You'll say, "Geez, Jim, I never knew that about you." Well, because you asked the question differently, that's why. And that's human communications. And but in any event, it came up. The police went back, followed it up, and they came up with the suspect's name. And his name was Nelson de Jesus. And it was Portuguese gentleman. Gentleman, not a gentleman at all. Former employee, former cleaner, undependable, unreliable, inflated self-image. Their company uniform used to be like a soft polo shirt, soft-collared polo shirt. And underneath that, he would wear a collared work shirt. I mean, like a business shirt with a tie. So imagine that, me wearing another shirt with a tie under a top like this, walking around, and I'm the cleaner. That's he's thinking he's management material, and nobody else is thinking that. And
so far everything ticks off your list here.
It gets better. It gets better. So they start looking into his background, and he has a record for sexual assaults. He's committed 2 rapes with a replica handgun, and he's been sentenced to 6 years in prison for doing it. And both victims testified against him. So when I heard that, I said, well, that's probably one of the most important things in my mind that you've uncovered that, because there's the reason of the time lag. Well, Lisa is redressing, putting her top back on, and he's thinking, I don't want to go back to jail. There's no way I want to go back to jail. I got my knife in my hand. I'm going to have to kill her. And he stabs her 3 times and then inflicts a horrendous neck wound as well. And then he leaves. So we got some real predatory behavior. You know, you've got 2 previous rapes and another rape, but he's now crossed the line into homicide. So this puts him in a different class. It's all predatory behavior. It's repetitive, which a lot of sexual offending is normally. And he's out there and he thinks he's not going to get caught for this one. So what's he doing now? They said there's DNA from those first 2 cases. So we're going to get the DNA from those first 2 rapes and try and get a DNA sample from him and match them up. And then for sure it's a done deal. And it takes a while because they've got to follow him until he throws something away. We call it cast off DNA, whether it's a piece of food that he's eaten, or he's drinking out of a pop can, or he's chewing gum and he spits it out, or he's smoking a cigarette and he dumps it on the ground. If it comes out of your mouth, I want it, and we're going to analyze it. We're going to get DNA out of it and match it to possibly DNA from the crime scene, DNA from previous crimes, and lock in that you're the guy. And so they're following him downtown, waiting for him to get rid of some DNA, and he's following women at nighttime, and then he breaks off into alleys, and they see him masturbating in alleys. So, jeez. I mean, this guy's a little out of control, and that goes along with the personality trait of impulsiveness, which is not a good thing when you're looking at criminal offending, because impulsive offenders act too quickly and they don't consider the consequences of their acts, and the wrong things can happen for the wrong reasons, and they're not thinking logically, and they just do what is in their mind at the current time.
Well, so literally while he's under surveillance, he's following women and masturbating in public areas. Wow.
Yeah, in the dark, but he's still visible to the detectives who are following, and they said he's going to rape another woman, and I said absolutely he's going to rape another woman. When this evidence comes back, you guys got to be prepared to arrest him immediately. So one of the other things that developed was one of the investigators went and knocked on his door and asked him about the murder of Lisa Poslins. And I was horrified that they did this. Like, talk about tipping your hand, talking about letting a dangerous guy know that you now suspect him of a murder, a sexual homicide.
Why did they do that?
That's what I asked. And the guy who knocked on the door was a supervisor, and he was pretty confident in his own abilities. And he said, I wanted to see how he answered me. And of course, the guy's going to deny it. And he did deny it. And then you've got nothing to act on. So really, you've tipped your hand, you've showed your cards, you let him know that he's under suspicion, and you've got to walk away. And I said, using our knowledge of risk assessment and everything else, we've got a predatory guy, ongoing sexual misconduct of the highest order, continuing predatory following of women, impulsive masturbating out in public places, and he's probably carrying a weapon. And I said, do you realize the kind of risk you're dealing with? I said, if I were you, I would make a media release saying, put the guy's picture up, and this guy is a suspect in this murder for the protection of women in the downtown core of Toronto. And they said, do you really think he's that dangerous? And I said, absolutely. And at the time in our unit, we had a forensic psychiatrist who's one of the best well-known forensic psychiatrists in Canada. And I went to him and I confirmed my fears about this, the risk of reoffending. And he said, absolutely, I'd back you on that, Jim. So I called the detective in charge of the case again, and I said, mister, you need to make this media release. You need to make it today. So they had planned at that same time, or like within hours, the DNA came back and he was the guy. They went to arrest him at his door. He was gone. They did 24-hour surveillance on his house, and he slipped out on them. How? I don't know, but he was able to get out, and he's out there, and he knows he's a suspect, and he's at risk. Women are at risk. He's at risk of reoffending. Women are at risk of dying. And I said, get that release out on the news right now, and they did. And it wasn't until 10:30 that night that De Jesus came back to his door, and they picked him up and they made an approach, and he starts running down the street. So we've got a big foot chase rather. And as he's running, he's throwing things. So some athletic cop down there gets close to him, corners him, and he pulls a knife on the police officer. Police officer draws his gun, doesn't shoot. Has every legal justification to shoot, doesn't. Tells the guy to put his knife down and get down on the ground. He does. So they arrest him. And as they're bringing him back to the cruiser, they start picking up everything that he had been throwing away. And he threw away a ski mask that would have covered his face. He threw away a pair of handcuffs. He's throwing condoms away out of his pocket. He's throwing away a small can of Vaseline that would have been like a sexual lubricant for him. So he's carrying the items that together we believe forms a rape kit. Wow. And so, yeah, that's pretty hard and fast knowledge that this guy's out there stalking, hunting sexual victims. So they've got him under arrest. He doesn't confess. They get a couple warrants. They go into his house, and they're looking for things that evidence of the crime or evidence of other predatory behavior. And they come up with a knife collection, and there's a knife in a sheath. And in the sheath, they find evidence of Lisa's DNA and bloodstains inside the knife sheath. And they find a cell phone, and he had blocked the phone ID and called her business number 5 times. And that was on the call logs inside the phone. There was all kinds of books about rape, sexual offending, serial killers, stuff like that. So he's reading, trying to see how other investigations went. He's trying to educate himself. Wow. How other guys got caught. We see this all the time from certain offenders. I can predict they're going to be in some offenders' rooms.
Well, hang on a sec. The phone calls that he was making, I assume that was prior to the murder. Is that right?
Yeah.
So did he had her targeted for somehow? Do you know how he had targeted?
It would appear. Now, how he knew she was going to be in there that night escapes me. He never explained it. We can't explain it. He shouldn't have been able to know. I think he was just in the building cruising, looking for anybody, and he found Lisa. He had obviously spotted her before, so she was on his radar. But I could tell that even before we knew who he was, I could tell from the crime scene that he wouldn't have been one of her partners, an intimate partner with her. She was from a different stratosphere compared to him. He wouldn't have been on the list of possible dating partners or anything. Ex-boyfriends, nothing. Like they just came from two different worlds.
Back to the actual murder. So I remember you said there were 3 stab wounds and then a slash to the throat. I assume he stabbed her, and then it was like the finishing act was the slashing. Is that right? What does that tell you?
That's how I would interpret it, because when you look at injuries, you can tell, sort of guess what part of the sequence they occurred in. And there's a lot of variables. When you stab somebody, there's a lot of variables. The knife that you use, my position, the victim's position, my movement, the victim's movement, and you don't just get a straight in and out sometimes. Sometimes you get like a glancing wound, or you get a wound where the knife goes in. Maybe the victim responds in pain, moves, and the knife comes out a different direction, and it produces an irregular shape. But where you start getting straight in and out punctures, those are final wounds. The victim is losing the fight. They're losing their ability to move and react. And the offender is able to just do a straight stab. But when there's an actual fight going on, you get far more irregular wounds that don't target lethal areas of the body, because you're putting up too much of a fuss, and I'm trying to stab you, but you try and defend me. You might get a defensive style wound on your arm, or you block it away, or I'll get a glancing cut on my arm. But when you're able to inflict a knife wound, you've got pretty good control of somebody at that point, and you really intend to cause their death. And that's how I saw it going on. So it started with a couple of stabs and then finished with the final neck wound.
Wow.
And
so in your opinion, would this, I mean, thank God he got taken off the streets. It was a little too late, obviously, because of Lisa Poslin's death. But in your opinion, would this guy have gone on to be a serial killer?
That's my fear. And I think he would have been at high risk to do that, because there was no stopping this guy. He had very little control over his behavior. He was very driven by his sexual urges. Obviously, I mean, he's following women downtown, masturbating in alleyways and stuff like that. He's got all the equipment of a rape kit. He's reading things about rape and serial murder. He's got a knife collection. He's everything that I would expect out of a guy with a high risk of sexual reoffense. And he's already made the decision that he's going to kill victims so they don't testify against him and send him back to prison. And that's
scary.
Yeah, well, there's some scary guys out there. And this guy, he was a scary guy. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of murders, but the serial murder is fairly rare. Of all the murders that you get, most are single issue things, conflicts between people, robberies that happened, arguments that happened, things like that. But the serial guys that want to go on, that are gratified by that level of violence and or gratified by sex and have to kill their victims, serious public safety issues with that one. And I thought I was very pleased. The profile was that accurate. The Toronto police estimated it was 92% accurate.
Wow.
I think it was like 94% accurate myself, but that's a very good day for people in our field. Ballpark, we hope to be 70% accurate. If you go north of that, that's a good day. But when you think it convinced a civilian to go and follow up on this, and she was successful in getting part of the information that identified the killer, and so much was accurate about it and prevented him from going out and doing it again. Yeah, that's a great case for me. Not my biggest case, not my scariest case, but uniquely interesting, I thought. And it's one of those ones that I carry around, and there's a lot to remember. Just the loyalty of Lisa's sister was astounding, and she went the distance, and she was a big contributor, and that's all I ever did, was try to contribute to other people's investigations to help them be successful. Sometimes you make little contributions, sometimes you make bigger contributions, and this was definitely one that helped get a real bad guy off the street. So
kudos to you. And people hate the word, and I hate the word too, and it's not closure, but you gave them, the family, some semblance of peace, knowing that this guy was taken off the street. So kudos to you. Canada is too kind, because I read he got sentenced to life, but he's eligible for parole after 25 years. Do you think he would reoffend if he's ever let out, Jim?
30. He was 32. He's 25, 57. Yeah, he could reoffend easily. But this 25-year thing, that's pretty elastic. When you're sentenced to life in Canada, I mean, a lot of people do make parole at 25 years, but a lot don't. And this would be one of the cases that the parole board would look at for ongoing risk to the public, what he's done. If he didn't confess to the police, he's not going to be cooperative with the parole board at all. He is not going to take responsibility or accountability for his crime. He's not going to express any remorse. This is what they're looking for. They're going to look at what he's been doing in custody for the last 25 years. He's a punk. He's a hood. I mean, he's walking around. He's using the street name Miami. He looks, he's pretty swarthy guy. He looks like he could be Latino, Hispanic, something like that. But he's not. And, but he wants to play the role. That's the type, and walking around with a collared shirt. There's a narcissistic component to this guy's personality that isn't going to work for him. And he's going to get in trouble in custody. And that's, one of the things they look at. And I would think he's not going to get parole at 25 years.
It sounds like he should not. Did you ever have a chance to speak to Lisa Poslin's sister after the arrest?
No, I didn't. And I don't think they got much in the way of closure or comfort. I think that she was able to take some benefit from what she did for her sister, the loyalty and the fact that she helped put everything straight and get the guy that got them. But yeah, their lives, I mean, all murder victims' lives are ruined. They never come back. There's no such thing as closure. it's life changing forever, and they never get over that. And she can look at herself in the mirror and say, I did the right thing. I did the right thing for Lisa, and helped protect other women. But yeah, they were heartbroken, and they will remain so. Murder is always tragic for the survivors, and there's nothing more that can be done about it. We do what we can do. We try and put everything right. We try and get the bad guy where he should be, where he's not going to hurt anybody else, and then we move on to the next case. And that's the best we can do. And I was happy to contribute to this one and other cases like it.
Well, Jim Van Allen can look in the mirror tonight and know that he's a phenomenal profiler, helped put a lot of bad guys away. For those who do not know, Jim Van Allen is a certified profiler and experienced threat and risk assessment specialist. Over 31 years of experience in law enforcement with the Ontario Provincial Police Department, 15 of which were spent as manager of the OPP Criminal Profiling Unit. Thanks a lot, Jim.
Welcome.
Love you, America. Love you, Canada. Until next time.